As global economies move to sanction Russian oil, it is having global ramifications, sending the price of oil surging right around the world. So is this a wake-up call to Western countries about how dangerous it is to depend on countries like Russia? Ebony Bennett from the Australia Institute joins me now for more on this story. Ebony, lovely to see you as always. Is this a wake-up call for Western countries?
Look, it definitely is, and certainly the European Commission and the EU have recognised that it's a big strategic problem for the EU that it's so reliant on Russian gas in particular. 40% of its gas needs are dependent on Russia. So it has certainly announced that it will be looking at trying to reduce demand by at least 2/3 by the end of this year on Russian gas. And meanwhile, the UK and the United States, who are much less dependent on Russian oil and gas, have announced even harsher sanctions, with the US implementing a ban and the UK looking to exclude Russian imports by the end of this year. So there's a lot happening, but certainly I think many countries are examining their dependence on Russia for their energy needs. And certainly the EU is saying that the answer to this security problem for them is greater diversification of its energy and rapid decarbonisation as soon as possible, bringing online new renewable energy resources as soon as they possibly can.
Should we look to be changing the way that this argument is approached, rather than speaking about fossil fuels, which many countries and their leaders can never seem to agree on, but to say to people that we need to move away from being so reliant on countries like Russia that we don't agree with, because surely most people, despite their political views in regards to fossil fuels, they would agree with this sentiment?
Yeah, there's certainly a huge moral argument to be put here, as well as a strategic one. But I think there are other arguments that appeal to people as well that aren't necessarily environmental. So obviously the cost of oil and gas is going through the roof at the moment. We know that renewable energy puts downward pressure on electricity prices for a start. So there are certainly hip pocket appeals to people as well, but certainly at the moment, the Ukrainian president, I think, has really been a clarion call for a moral and ethical approach. And he has, I think, helped unite the West in seeing that there is a real moral case to be put here to help the people of Ukraine. Obviously, sending in troops, enforcing a no-fly zone really runs the risk of rapidly escalating this conflict. All we are left with at the moment is punitive sanctions against Russia. And it's unfortunate that, it's not as urgent or as impactful as the people of Ukraine need, as we've seen some of those hideous videos coming out, in particular of Mariupol.
I wanted to talk to you about that. The maternity ward has been hit. Women, pregnant women in labour being attacked and injured, being carted out there. The footage is so extreme. And I mean, every innocent civilian in Ukraine that is being attacked or killed or injured, they're all worth the same. Every life is worth the same. But this has just hit differently here. You're seeing pregnant women who are about to go into labour or are in labour being attacked here. It is just horrific what we're seeing out of there. What did you make of that footage? What is it going to take to stop Putin?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I think we've all been absolutely shocked by that footage, but certainly it's nothing new. Russian forces have been targeting a lot of civilian targets. Civilians are absolutely in the line of fire here, which is contrary to international law of armed conflict. But it looks like a price that Vladimir Putin is willing to pay to inflict that price on Ukrainian civilians, perhaps because his forces have not been as successful as he planned. It looks like a bit of a scorched earth policy here, which is hugely concerning for Ukraine. They do need a lot more assistance, and who only knows where it's going from here if the Russian president is willing to target not only civilian infrastructure, but hospitals, which are traditionally off limits when it comes to armed conflict. So it's certainly incredibly concerning, and it's hard to see where he will go from here, to be honest. And I think that's why you're seeing sanctions stepping up. as well as, everything else that the global community can do to come to the aid of Ukraine, because we're all absolutely horrified by these scenes. Pictures of bodies out on the streets, reports that the Ukrainian authorities in Mariupol in particular might be looking at having to bury people in mass graves. It's absolutely awful.
It's heartbreaking. There are no words to describe what we're seeing at the moment. It's absolutely horrific. Ebony, thanks for your time today on this really important conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.